So it's best for me to jump right in there as there's a lot to cover in this time frame. There are essentially three parts to my sharing today. The first part is about performance, potential, and resonance. The second piece is on the resonance survey that we have recently concluded and its findings that we're really excited to share with you about today. And the last part is about some suggested next steps. So I think it bears no argument that performance matters now, probably more so than ever before. Organizations have become a lot leaner, definitely in Asia, and I'm sure that this represents itself around the world as well. Greater pressure, therefore, on each individual is there for them to perform and to create and to be part of a sustainable culture that delivers results over time. You know, numerous leaders that we have worked with have effective performance as a main agenda item whenever they've talked to us. And in the literature, we've seen many articles trying to understand what constitutes and creates high performance. The only thing, however, is that performance by itself is not enough. There was research that was conducted by the Corporate Leadership Council in 2005, and its findings are still relevant today. It said that only a third of high performers were identified as high potentials. Of course, nearly all high potentials were currently high performers. And it also said that 75% of organizations feel that high potentials were at least 50% more valuable than that of other employees. So I guess they are probably feeling that way because they see that high potentials have greater capabilities and that they are able to perform at a different level over time as well. I guess it says that there is something in there that has as yet been unlocked and that contribute to greater performance over time. So therefore, it's not unusual that there has been disproportionately high amount of resources allocated towards high potentials, whether it be financial resources or even, and perhaps crucially, executive time and attention. So then, how does one unlock potential? And is it something that all of us can uncover? As my co-founder Ruchika and I deepened our reflections, it occurred to us that the times in which we ourselves or others that we spoke to grew the most significantly were times when we felt great resonance and great connection with other individuals. Because it was then that we allowed ourselves to be vulnerable with them, perhaps challenged by them, intrinsically knowing that they did not have any other agendas apart from ours, ultimately. So then, of course, the question is, what is resonance? If we look at the dictionary definition, we can see that a lot of the definitions are borrowed from the field of physics. And in it, it says that resonance refers to sound that is created, produced, or increased in one object by sound waves from another object. On a resonant team, the members move together, so to speak, with great positive emotional energy. It was really interesting for me to find that there was research done at Case Western University by a lady called Vanessa Druskett. And in her research, it showed that when a team as a whole resonates, it predicts that it will be a top performing team no matter what its performance criteria might be. So I guess this says, organizationally, resonant teams amplify positive outcomes. And that it really doesn't matter how high the bar may have been set, because these teams and the individuals are in sync, there is an intuitive flow, and they truly become, over time, a force to be reckoned with. So the next two slides that I'm going to show are courtesy of Dr. Mary Case, an accomplished neuropathologist, and an Emergenetics associate based in the US, and most importantly, a wonderful friend. When Mary heard that I was presenting on resonance, she sent me two slides on neurocoupling. And let me explain what that means. This is actually a study from Urin Hanson's psychology research group in Princeton. Now you will see the yellow arrows on the left-hand side of the screen. Let me talk you through that. In this study, a speaker, as seen by the green spikes, was telling a story while another person in the orange spikes listened, and both their brains were monitored. Now, this research documents the unique mirroring that happens between the two. When speakers and listeners are engaged, there is brain coupling. As you would expect, on the very first arrow, in some areas, the speaker's brain processes precede that of the listeners. In the second arrow, as you can see, when comprehension increases, there is actually a zero lag time in processing between the two. But most fascinatingly, in cases where comprehension or resonance was the highest, the listener's brain activity actually precedes that of the listener. And this is so interesting because how many times have we been in resonance with someone and we could almost predict what they were about to say to us? So, while such research is interesting, sadly enough, there hasn't been very much organizational research on resonance, although those who have experienced this have usually felt very positive feelings, and it's accompanied by great outcomes. And it was because of this lack that we felt compelled to initiate a very small study to understand it better so that the insights could help individuals and teams become their best selves. So, before I go into the research proper, which is the second part of my sharing today, I'd just like to take a very few moments to thank all of you who responded to the questionnaire, as well as those who took the time to drop me emails about how appreciative you were in being asked to recollect these significant moments that was created in your lives, and especially about the individuals who made such a positive difference to you. It was particularly heartening for us to hear that many of you also reconnected with those who made that difference in your life after that. So let me just set the context for the survey before we go into the actual findings. It was a 9-question survey which was sent out to a group of global respondents who then became our sample group. These respondents were asked to recollect situations in which they felt resonance with a person or persons. 7 other questions as well was in the survey, and we also asked them for the Emergenetics profile almost right at the end. Now, unfortunately, because resonance doesn't happen very frequently, we thought it was useful to have a list of descriptors on resonance so that they could understand what it was when we said, please
This
describe a
conference is
feeling of
being
being
ended
in
due to
sync,
inactivity.
on the same
All callers
wavelength,
will
or
be
when someone had
disconnected.
set the tone for you.
And we do apologize for a slight technical glitch, and you are now listening to Miss Deborah Peterson, who's co-founder of Metis Group, and she's going through her slides on resonance. So I'm just going to hand the time back to Deborah.
Thank you, Terence. So, all right. Sorry about that. Okay, so just to recap, in case that got cut off in the last bit, because resonance doesn't happen very frequently, we decided to put together a list of descriptors as shown on the following page. Okay, and as you can see, there is a very long list of the descriptors here, but to summarize that, we would like to show you 5 key descriptors that encapsulates all others, and they are having a shared sense of purpose, values, being calm, grounded, relaxed, yet energized, being respected for your strengths as well as your difference, an awareness of others around you and the gifts that they bring, an allowance for not just the analytical or cognitive insights, but the intuitive, emotional ways of being. So, to either support or dispel our premise that being in resonance helped uncover talents, gifts, or potential within the respondent group, we actually asked them, did being in resonance uncover talents, gifts, or potentials in you which you had not realized you had? And amazingly, more than 90% of respondents actually answered yes. We then asked them what were some of the outcomes they gained as a result of being in resonance. And the responses really surprised us in the effusiveness to which people described what it had unlocked. This is, as you can see on the screen, one sample of what was actually shared. If it's captured on slides, it will probably have captured another 3 pages of exactly this amount of volume. But to summarize again, here are some of the things that people said were outcomes of them being in resonance. And of course, we pulled some of these ones out because it is a reflection to us of some of the questions that leaders normally come to ask. They would say, how do I get my people to be more creative in their work? How would they be able to overcome the challenges or obstacles? How do I make them more productive? How do I get them to exceed expectations? How do I get them to be less fearful of what is unknown? How do I get them to be more innovative? How do we have more fun? And actually, I think that the results from research in resonance, a very small survey, probably proves this. Of course, we were very curious, and we also wanted to know what may have accounted for the sense of resonance that they felt. So we asked the question, what may have accounted for the sense? And in summary, this is what some people have said, that they have known the individuals for very many years, that they probably came from similar moral beliefs or religious faiths or backgrounds or ambitions, that they were in the same stage of life, probably had the same value systems, had some common vision, and most essentially, that the individuals were very supportive and non-judgmental. Of course, we also had others who reflected almost the opposite of these reasons. In fact, one survey respondent said that she felt an almost instant resonance with an individual that she had just met. And I think some of us may also have felt that way in the past too. And so that's why we were very glad that we asked for more details in this question. What specifically did that person do which caused you to feel in resonance with them? And that was when things got really interesting. Because when we mapped their responses to the emergenetics metaphor, as you can see here, the majority of the respondents showed a correlation between their emergenetics profile and what someone said or did that connected with them at a deeply resonant level. Now, the next two slides that I'm going to show with you are just a composite summary of responses, which had the correlations between what someone did and how it spoke to their attributes. For want of space, I've only captured 5 bullet points in each thinking attribute and 3 under the behaviors. So let's start off first with the thinking attributes. Respondents that had preferences in analytical thought shared that others that resonated with them were able to challenge lazy thinking, that they gave them reasons for why they disagreed with them, that they valued their input even if they didn't always agree, that intelligent humor permeated their words, and that there was a wonderful sense of understanding to their values. Structural preference thinker said that the other individual modeled for them what they should do to play to their strengths, that they said what they meant and they meant what they said, that they were very respectful of time, they showed the way and they led by example. Social preference thinker shared that they saw them for who they were, they connected with them on the emotional level, they showed genuine concern for them, that they were willing to be vulnerable, and they were always transparent and honest when dealing with me. Conceptual preference thinkers shared that the other individual was very open to new ideas communicated by them, that they were able to easily springboard off each other's ideas, that they were challenged to think bigger, brighter, better, that they were allowed to expand in their worldview, and interestingly enough, that they were very optimistic as well. Moving on now to the behavioral attributes. Again, the data showed a whole range where it came to each of the behavioral attributes. For want of space, I've decided to just look at 3. But as I go through it, I think you'll be able to see that the attributes were actually all accounted for, whether an individual was in the first third part of the spectrum, the second third, or the third part of the spectrum. Let's look, for example, at, let's start off with expressiveness. The first bullet point, individuals listened intently, they gave opportunities to work independently, and they were quiet when I was speaking. Interestingly enough, perhaps this came from a first set expressive thinker. And then individuals also matched their energies. Again, this came from a second third expressiveness thinker. And third expressive thinker actually said they were a master of words. Now you'll actually see a small bullet point there that says complete my sentences. This is very interesting. Out of all the respondents, whether the individual was the first third expressive or third in terms of expressiveness, both reflected that individuals they felt resonant with could complete their sentences for them. And perhaps this reflects, again, going back to the neuroscience slides that Mary Grace had shown us, that when there is synergy, there is resonance, the brain actually couples together. So as not to go through the rest of the slides, I'm sure that these slides will be available on the web. I will just leave this here for now and just move on to our next part of the presentation. So what were some of the reflections that came out? Well, firstly, that there were very interesting correlations and synergies when individuals speak to or help others lean into the areas of preferences. I'd like to share with you a few sound bites that came out of the survey. So these are actual comments as it is shown. We've shortened some, of course, but as individuals said it best themselves, one individual said, thinking about it professionally, it is understanding me from the EG perspective, even though they or I did not know that it was such at that point, and that usually brought about that resonance. The person I'm thinking of valued my committee, my behaviors and hers matched. The next person said, anyone who understood my preferences generally created that resonance. That is not saying that it allowed me to lean into it all the time, but helped me to develop the good parts of it and watch out for the pitfalls of it. And finally, we were truly a we team. I felt that resonating with all the people here has encouraged growth in my assertiveness because it's a safe place to express my thoughts. So as I mentioned earlier, this is seminal research. We have put this together because there has been a lack of such organizational research at this point in time. But we do see this as research in motion, and we will be continuing to study and develop applications around resonance in our work with organizations. However, as some food for thought, what can we do as individuals, teams, and leaders? So here are a couple of suggestions that we'd like to leave you with. For individuals, start, of course, with self-awareness. Ask yourself, what gifts do I bring to the table? What are my gaps? And if you look at the article from the Harvard Business Review in 2010 that talked about, are you a high potential? It really says, make your mark, deliver strong results credibly. And as we can actually see from the work that we've done in Emergenetics, when you live through and deliver through your preferences, you can actually demonstrate really strong results. The other thing is master new expertise. Don't be afraid of what you currently don't know. And of course, recognize that behavior counts. For teams, here are 3 suggestions. Become aware of others around you and the gifts that they bring. Share your preferences and influence resonance so that your talents can be noticed, can be unlocked. Start to understand the team goals and workflows in context of your preferences, and then strategically identify your areas of impact. Leaders, what do we do? Knowing that leadership is a really difficult task, here are a couple of things that you might consider. Firstly, start by knowing your team, their preferences, and how they contribute strongly. Initiate individual dialogue about how to bring about their best selves. Accept where they are, but expect that the best selves will show up. And if that's the case, encourage risk-taking and exploration. And of course, understand that mistakes may happen, but create a safe enough environment such that that's okay. Identify workflow, processes, or behavior biases in each department. Now, what does this mean? In some organizations that we have been in, we have seen that some behaviors are more highly regarded than others. Perhaps the ability to rationalize data, perhaps the ability to structure a workflow. Whilst all of that is good, make sure that you have the opportunity of identifying if it has become a bias, because then that will actually cut off the opportunity for others to actually contribute. Of course, lastly, sustain the culture that values and respects diverse gifts. And I think if there's one other thing that I could actually add, leaders, we've seen from the research so far that it is also important to be vulnerable. Being vulnerable, being transparent, helps to unlock growth in yourself and in others. And in that way, you can actually start to create resonance within your teams and in the teams that work with yours. So, a couple of final thoughts. There was an incredible amount of wisdom in the responses gained through the survey. We've put it all together as a summary for today. And this is a composite of thoughts that were shared as part of people's responses. And it said, it didn't matter if we were matched in thinking or behavioral attributes perfectly. It was more important that we respected the similarities and differences in these attributes and the role that the attributes play in building trust with each other. I've resonated with similar profiles and opposite profiles, and at the end of the day, it all boils down to mutual respect, making it safe to be different, celebrating that every attribute brought gifts to the table. And when the main agenda was to help people to be their best selves, amazing outcomes followed. I see now that Emergenetics provides a tangible and good roadmap, and the rest of it depends on the people on the journey. So if you would like to be in touch with us as we further deepen our research into resonance and applications, please do write with us. I hope that we've been able to share with you today how we see Emergenetics as a way of catalyzing resonance and thereby really unlocking potential in individuals and in organizations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And of course, that was Ms. Deborah Peterson, who is a co-founder of the Metis Group. She's based in Singapore. And of course, she had shared with us her recent research into resonance and how she's managed to combine that with the understanding of emergenetics so that we could really bring the potential of the individual as well as the team to effect. If you've got questions, we're just opening the session up now for questions. Please type your questions into the Q&A box, and you can find that on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. I'm just going to start off by asking Deborah a couple of questions. So Deborah, with okay, she's signaling that I should just give her one question. So Deborah, with your experience in a corporate environment, across the different industries from Fortune 500 right through to startups, and now with your current research into resonance, how would you see the trend moving forward in terms of people moving into the space of understanding more about resonance or even creating resonance? I guess where I'm coming from, it's if we look at the history or the trend of organization development or people development, there has been lots and lots of studies and different approaches that different people take. And of course, now it's really exciting to hear more about resonance. And you quite rightly pointed out that there hasn't been a lot of research in this area. So assuming now that we are also in love with resonance, how then do we take this new area of research and bring it into an organization? I'm thinking already things like roadblocks that people would put up. People will be thinking about cultural differences. Oh, could this only be a fad? How do we implement new approaches and so on? So in your years of experience, bringing in new research from neuroscience or organization development, how do we bring a topic like resonance into an organizational space so that people could say, wow, this is something that we could really tap into? What kind of challenges do you think HR managers or leaders may potentially face in bringing in something new like resonance into their organization?
Thank you, Terence. Well, that's a really huge question. There are many, many different things in there. But I guess the reason why we started off with this equation from the perspective of potential, that is common language in many organizations. I think many organizations are keen on understanding if they can tap into latent potential. And of course, the answer is yes. The question, though, is how. Now, whether you subscribe to Emergenetics or any other tools, there are, of course, many ways to roam. But what I have found is, in terms of potential itself, if we were to look at it by way of, just individuals that have reflected about the times in which they have been at high potential, it's really been when they have resonated with someone. If we were to think back in our own lives about people who have helped us to become more than who we thought we were, there was something about that individual. And for us, what is that something happens to be resonance, and it happens to be able to be something that we could unlock through the very simple to understand metaphor of Emergenetics. And so that's one of the reasons why I think that using the metaphor of Emergenetics allows us to be able to slowly lead organizations down this path of understanding resonance.
Thank you very much, Deborah, for that answering that question. I think we've got one question from Ed, who is, and his question is: are there any public examples of resonant teams? Okay, I'm not sure if you heard my question the last round. We have one question from Ed, and his question is: are there any public examples of resonant teams?
So in the research that we have looked at this point in time, I think A lot of it has been based in academia, and of course, a couple of organizations that have undertaken this, but not in the large enough scale for us to say that there are sufficient public examples. But hopefully, with the work that we have started and with more publicity around it, we can actually, start to look at perhaps research from Asia, perhaps first as a foundation, and moving on to other examples, perhaps that could be emulated by organizations too.
Thank you. So maybe just to round it all up, I'd like to tap into Deborah's vision of the future. Where do you see, this work on resonance, and how do you see it pan out over the next 5 to 10 years? Do you think this is going to be, a topic that people should be watching for? Certainly, you have seen the kind of results or the synergy that we can create within teams. But where do you see the future of the topic of resonance in the future?
Well, Terence, it is my hope that the understanding of resonance becomes more commonplace in future. Not only just the understanding, but the living out of resonance. I think, as Ruchika and I were discussing, we were saying that this is not to solve world hunger or to promote world peace. But if societies and if teams could be more resonant, could be more, accepting and supportive of each other and helping each other create their best selves, I think it will only make organizations way better. I think it will only make communities way better. And so therefore, it's truly our hope that this takes a life of its own and becomes everyday vocabulary.